So I've just gotten all of my winter coats out of storage, and by all I mean 3, which is what I have, which I think is very reasonable. And I realised the gripe that I keep having with modern coats. So just hang on. This is one of my favourite coats. My friend used to work at a pub, and this was in the lost and found. No one came to get it. It's a wool blend, it's beautiful, it's a little tight. I can wear it straight like this. However, have you noticed that when you wear modern straight coats, you get this weird skirt thing at the front, and it's not... Hang on, I'll show you better. I'll show you another example. This is also a favourite coat. It's much lighter, so it's more like a mid-season coat. But I'm fairly certain this used to be in like a 1940s house coat kind of thing. But I wear it as a coat. And when I've got it done up, it squeezes skirts. You can't wear a full skirt on this. You end up looking ridiculous. And you might think, oh, don't worry, Kat, all you really need is like a swing coat. This is my other favourite coat. I bought this at a vintage kilo sale. It's not vintage, I think it's from C&A. But this is beautiful. I love it. And yes, it's got a good full skirt. It does not squeeze down your skirt. However, it is not made to be worn with tight underlayers, and this is very tight. So, or big sleeves. This is so tight. So, what I need is a coat that I can wear with big poofy skirts, big jumpers with big sleeves. Can we do it? Thankfully, history has already solved all of these problems for me. So, here is my plan. I am going to make a historically adjacent coat. Thankfully, there is a particular decade that really favours full skirts and full sleeves, and so they had to wear outerwear anyway to keep warm. And this decade is the 1860s. If you're new here on the channel, I'm low-key obsessed with the 1860s. I love the idea of the big princess ball gowns, and I have made one in the past, and I also made a little capelet to go with it. And when I was buying patterns for that project, I also bought a pattern for a long 1860s bodice. So it was very common actually in the 1860s to have a long bodice that often went over the skirt and looked a little bit more like a coat. Some of these could be outerwear, some of them were bodices that were just worn in that sort of way. And here are a few examples. This is my main inspiration. Absolutely loved this combination, and this is the kind of thing I want to go for, but with slightly longer skirts because it's meant to be more of a coat for me. And thankfully for this, I had already purchased a pattern. This is my starting point. So this is a pattern that is original from a German magazine from the 1860s, and this bodice looks very, very similar to this main inspiration. I also found different other inspirations that were similar, just to keep in that sort of style. This pattern I bought online. I think the shop is called Past Patterns or Repeated Originals. I'll link them down below. They've basically scanned, digitized a bunch of historical patterns, and you can buy them as a PDF, and then you can print them at home, or in my case I got them printed at Fabulous Sew, which is a UK printer that I really love. And so this is my main starting point. And what I did was I traced out the pattern, because it's not actually, the pattern isn't as long as this image indicates. The pattern actually only comes about the waist or a few inches below the waist. So I Frankensteined it with my favorite skirt pattern just to fill out the shape. And my first step is to make a mock-up. I'll show you the pattern in a second, but first I want to show you my materials. So for this, I'm trying to use as much of stash fabric as absolutely possible. And for this, I will be using this wool blend suiting. This was a grey toned wool blend suiting that I bought because it was on a huge discount, and I've actually already made 2 skirts and a 3-tiered Edwardian cape from this fabric, but I still have loads left, and I think it would be a really nice versatile fabric. However, I wasn't too big of a fan of the grey tone, so I actually threw it in the washing machine, in the wool cycle, and I dyed it to be a little bit more of a brown tone. So it's a little bit browner than it was original. It didn't take too much, but that's fine. I have loads of this, so I thought it'd just be a really great use of something from my stash. And then I also have this plain brown cotton sateen for lining. This wasn't from the stash, but I didn't really have anything appropriate. And this has a really nice smooth surface, so I don't want anything that will like cling to clothes beneath it. So it has a really smooth feel to it, so that it slips, but it's still natural fibers, which is really good. I then also have some fusible interfacing, or is it woven interfacing? I have some interfacing from my stash. I can't really remember where I got this or how, but this is going to be for the wool suiting because it's actually very lightweight and I don't think it'll hold a very nice shape. So I'm going to fuse all the pieces as well. And then from my stash as well, I have some leftover batting. So this is some leftover wool batting from when I made my William Morris quilt, and I didn't really have much use for this. this because they're quite odd shapes, but I've put out my pattern on top of it and I think it's just enough. And I thought for a little bit of added warmth, I'm actually going to quilt the lining. And this was something that came to mind because I wanted to add warmth to the coat without changing the outer fabric. And then when I was searching around, I did find a coat from the 1840s that had a quilted lining, and I thought this was so cool. I'll link it down below so you can have a closer look. But I thought this was a really cool idea. So that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be doing some light sort of V-shaped quilting on the lining, and that is the plan. But of course the first stop is a mock-up. So I'm going to walk you through the pattern, and I'm going to cut out a mock-up and get started on this, so I can hopefully still wear it while it's cold. Okay, so here's my pattern draft, and I just wanted to talk you through it real quickly. So you can kind of see in pencil here, that's where the original pattern was. So what I did was I traced out the pattern as it was, and then I just extended it to have sort of volume, basically. The pattern is only 3 pieces. So this is the front, the side back, and the center back. I marked the waist so that I could keep it even, and then in blue, I'm making size adjustments. So I needed to add quite a lot to it to make sure it fit, number one, me, but also not just my waist. So I still have some adjustments to do to the back, so I only did them to the front. But basically, this is not meant to be my waist measurement. This is be my waist measurement plus skirt waistbands and thick jumpers because I want this to be practical. So I need to add a bit more to it to make sure that it will fit comfortably over my jumpers. And this is before I even make a mock-up. So I want to make these basic changes before I make a mock-up, and then I'm going to cut out the mock-up and get started with it. But yeah, let's see how it goes. So I just wanted to show you the mock-up. It doesn't look great because this is a duvet cover and it is not the greatest fabric to do a mock-up of a coat in, but it is what I have on hand, and that's always going to win out for me. So I have made some quite important changes to the pattern. I've already applied them to the pattern itself because I think I'm ready to cut out, I'm ready to commit. But I wanted to talk you through it because I think this is the hardest bit of sewing, especially if you're sewing in isolation. So some really important things that I've noticed immediately is that my waist is here, where I've marked it in pink, and the waist of the pattern is down here. So what I did was I just raised the waist by 1 inch on the pattern. Importantly as well, because of that, because my torso isn't as long as the original proportions of this pattern, the bust darts came way over my bust. So I have also moved the bust darts, shortened them essentially on the pattern to finish under my bust, because I think of all the Victorian patterns I've seen, they usually go either right to the underbust or just to the bust point and not really further. Later on in the century, you do get where you get a princess seam, but I think for this under the bust is fine, and also because it was slightly tight across the waist and the bust, so that also gave me a little bit more room in the bust, and I think I'm happy with this. The other thing I did as well was that I added a sleeve. This is something that I actually usually don't do. I usually do the sleeves at the end, but the sleeve does affect the way the bodice fits. So if this would flag any big issues, I wanted it to be right now rather than when it's cut. So the sleeve needs a few alterations. Mainly, I think it is too tight. It's not tight itself. You can see that there's like quite a lot of slag. And I am wearing a jumper, so that was the point. But I do want to be able to wear this coat with a little bit more of a thicker jumper if I want to. And also the real fabric will be lined with quilted, maybe not the sleeves, but it will definitely be lined, so it'll take up a bit more space. So I'm going to add a bit more ease to these sleeves, just at the top of the arm, just to ensure that they won't be too tight, because when the sleeves are tight, they restrict your movement. The cuff will be gathered into a little cuff. I think I will add a couple of inches to it as well. Otherwise, I believe that's it. The other important thing I did that is not shown on this mock-up, but I have done it to the pattern, is that I did mark it. Oh, here. You can see that the side seam is skewing forwards. So all I'm doing is I'm adjusting it to move so it's at the middle of my body here. And so what I did was I moved some of the bulk to the front so that this seam can then lay this way. And that's it. That's the main changes I've made. As I said, I think I am ready to commit and cut out. And yeah, I just wanted to show you as well something that I always do in my patterns, especially when I'm working with a historical pattern, is that I trace out the original in a different color, and then I make my modifications in a different color so that I can see if I'm keeping the style lines and proportions of the original. So this is, for example, the top part of the sleeve, because it's a 2-part Victorian sleeve. and this was the original, and this is by how much I've already added to it, and I still need to make it a little bit bigger. So yeah, I think I'm ready to tackle it, and I still want to wear this soon, so I think we better get a move on. So I'm about to start seaming, and I just wanted to talk you through one of the tricky seams on this, just because it might be the first time you're encountering something like this, which is quite common in historical sewing. Sorry about my dress form Euphrasia, who is very vintage. I've got the pattern on here just so you can see. So this is the center back, which is cut on the fold, and then you've got the side back panels. And what I mean that is the odd thing is that this is not a perfectly curved sort of princess seam or like curved seam as we know it. It is a square bit, and this is it looks very strange to us as modern sewers, but I've seen it a lot in historical patterns. And when I first came across it in some 18th century stays, I was absolutely stumped. I had no idea how to sew this. So I thought I'd just talk you through it in case it seems good or it's helpful. And I've got here an example because I've already basted them into place. So the way I do this, which is not necessarily the correct way, of course, it's just how I figure it out and how it works for me, is that I sew the square bit first. And I mark really clearly on the inside of my pieces the seam allowance and the bit where it'll intersect, where this seam allowance here will intersect the new seam allowance here, because that is the key, is to get that corner really clean. And so I sew that first, and then I press it open, and then I clip up to the corner here, and then I baste the rest of the seam together, wrong sides together as usual. And it's really just about clipping that corner and making sure that corner lies flat. And I would always recommend, if you've got curved seams like this, to always baste them, because it really does make a difference. And yeah, that's just how I do these types of seams. I thought it would be useful. So now I'm just going to take them to the machine and start stitching. So I forgot to put the pockets in, and that's funny because one of the first videos I ever did here on YouTube was about making a 1890s walking skirt, where I forgot to put the pockets in, and then I think I forgot to put the pockets in every single thing I made after that. But it's good to see that some things don't change. But I was just trying it on because actually forgetting the pockets is good, because that means I can measure exactly where I want my pockets to go. And I think I'll be putting them around here. Here feels right. So I'm just going to mark with a pin on the side seam what will be the top opening of my pocket. But also trying it on at this stage was really good, because actually I've already discovered a lot of issues. So I don't really know how this happened or why. But the bust darts, which I shortened and moved so that they would finish at my underbust, are about 3 centimeters over my bust. I don't know how this has happened. It's insane. And it's also not looking great for my bust, because it does still feel a bit tight around here. And yes, I'm wearing it over a t-shirt and a cardigan, but that is the point of a winter overcoat, so that's an issue. So I'm actually going to wait to put the pockets in just until I can fix these issues. And my first thought here is that I can maybe unpick the shoulder seam and try to lower the front a little bit. I'm not sure how this has happened. The side seam seems to be sitting a little bit better. I just don't understand how this could have happened. So I'm gonna have to try and figure something out. So I've kind of fixed it, but it's not a pretty fix. But at least the 1860s style lines are there now. So basically, I guess the proper fix would have been to fix it on the pattern and then cut out new fronts. However, I will never cut out big new pieces, especially like this, unless I absolutely have to, and I didn't feel like I had to. So basically what I did was I split open the shoulder seam and I put it on my dress form, and I aligned the waist with my waist position on the dress form and the darts with the bust, and then I saw where the shoulder line landed, and then I saw what I had to add. So I have cut out pieces of the shoulder, pieces of fabric to plaster onto the shoulder, and hopefully I think this has given me the space that I need to. However, now that I'm looking at it on the shoulder, I cut them all on the grain, and I actually feel like maybe on the bias they would wrap around the curved shoulder a bit better. So I might go and replace them with a piece that's cut on the bias just to use the fabric's natural stretch. Anyway, that's the fix, and I have identified a few more things I want to change before this coat is completed. Number one, I feel like it needs more structure. So this fabric, as I mentioned, is a wool and polyester blend of some sort, and I've interlined it. Well, I didn't interline it, I fused it to some fusible interfacing. That's given it a much better weight, but usually this part here is much more structured in Victorian clothing. So I'm going to dig out of my stash some horsehair canvas and possibly some canvas, and I'm going to layer up the inside of the front, at least around the armhole, definitely across the front here so it supports the buttons, and possibly across the top of the back too. I've done this on a few things before, like I made a waistcoat and I've made a little jacket, and it's something I really enjoy. I just wasn't expecting to have to do it for this coat, but if I want nice shaping, that's what's going to have to happen. And also it is very comfortable over my big cardigan, so that's great. But I also noticed that I have quite a lot of space here, and I think I may, after I've finalized this, before I put in the lining, I might take in these seams a little bit more just to give more shaping to the waist here. Yeah, otherwise I think it's really important to try on things as you make them, otherwise you might miss these things. So I'm gonna go fix the shoulders, put in the pockets, and then we'll go from there. Success! Kind of. So I have fixed the shoulder by pinning some fabric in, and I think that's just gonna have to do. I'm absolutely not gonna cut another front, and this is just how it's going to go. This actually works quite nicely, and I've actually done a test because this one here is cut on the grain, and you can see it pulls horizontally quite strongly, and then this one is cut on the bias and is much smoother, and that's because my shoulders are quite rounded, so it needs that stretch of the bias to sit nicely around the natural curvature of the body. So I'm really happy with that. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to change out the one that's cut on the grain for the bias, and then I'm going to top stitch them into place, and that's how it's gonna be. And then I can move on with putting in the pockets and starting to figure out how much canvas / horsehair I'm going to add to this to make sure it has the structure that it needs. So I just wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the structure of this coat, because I think that's probably one of the hardest things to understand really about kind of tailoring, even though I wouldn't call this tailoring because I have no training as a tailor. But anyway, when I tried it on, I noticed that even though I interfaced the fabric, I still wasn't really happy with the structure of it at the top, specifically at the front. And so I turned to tailoring techniques to add structure to coats and jackets and things. And so what I did was I added a layer of canvas across the front and sort of curving into the armhole there. And I made sure to cut away the darts to make sure it fit and also to reduce bulk. And then I also added a layer across the top here and just under the arms. So you kind of really only want to add structure strategically, not across the whole thing, because you'd add a lot of bulk. And then the last layer I added is this section here of horsehair canvas that has been pat stitched, and this is done to catch only the canvas or even the fusible interfacing that I added, and so it's not actually visible on the outside, but it does add a lot of structure. And this happened about like 6 hours of hand sewing on the sofa, so I don't really have any footage of it, but I do have some other videos where I do a bit of this tailoring, which is Victorian adjacent. I took a lot of my things usually from the Authentic Victorian Dressmaking Techniques, which is actually Sewing Up to Date by Butterick from the early 20th century. But I also wanted to give a shout out to this book, Classic Tailoring Techniques, because this is actually a really useful book, and I usually use a mix of these two, the advice of these two, but to end up with this. And I think I'm pretty happy with the structure it has now. So I'm actually going to move on to a few things that I still have to do, which are the lining, the sleeves, and possibly a collar. So yeah, time to move on. Okay, so I just wanted to show you, because I've been working on the lining, but I've been working mainly, as always, late in the evening, so I haven't really filmed much about it. But one of the really cool features about this Victorian-inspired coat is that I found an extant from the 1840s. It is a man's coat, but why not apply it to a women's coat, where they've quilted the lining, which I thought was a really cool idea to add warmth without having to change the outer fabric. So here I have a plain cotton that I've used for the lining, and then I've put in this wool batting that I used for leftovers from a quilt that I made last year. And then I just kind of tried to copy the same kind of, the extent that I saw had this V design in the quilting, and it wasn't like all throughout, it was just at specific points. So I did it over the torso and then just a little bit into the skirt, and I'm trimming it away from the seams so that it doesn't actually add as much bulk as it would if it was carried out into the seams. And I've seamed it all together. I do regret a little bit because I didn't put a lot of time into planning out where I was going to do the quilting, so I just kind of like did approximations and ended up being that it's not completely symmetrical and it's not completely matching or mirrored, but that's okay, I don't mind. But I think it looks really cool and it adds a really nice weight to the coat, and I think it'll add a lot of warmth because the fabric that I have for the outside, it is a wool blend, but it's not very warm, and I want this to be a good winter coat. So I'm pretty pleased with it. I just need to finish the shoulders here, and then I'm going to trim away excess from the seams to make it as lightweight as possible. And then I'm just going to do this again where I put it, so I've got the coat on underneath, inside out, and then I'm just going to pin it back on, align the seams where I can, baste it, and then the lining will be on for now. Yay! It's late at night, so you know what that means. Time for some night sewing and sleeves, of course. What a great idea to be tackling sleeves at night. So for these sleeves, I actually decided to use the pattern sleeves that came with it. I obviously had to change it a lot because it wasn't my size either. But the pattern that came with it is a quite curious but very typical 1860s pattern. And it kind of reminds me of like pagoda sleeves from the 1850s as well. But it's a two-part sleeve that, you know, has this very dramatic curve around the elbow. So your arm goes like this. And then there's a bell wide cuff here that's actually wider than the top, as you can see. Well, it's about the same, but that's because I had to expand the top and I didn't expand the bottom. But this will be gathered down into a cuff that kind of comes up and flips back, and I think that'll be really cute. Very historical, very 1860s. But this is just my outer fabric that I have interfaced with the same thing that I used for the coat, and then I've got my lining here. So the thing I have to decide is whether I actually want to quilt the lining or not, and this is because I've technically already run out of the batting that I used for the coat itself, but also because I think it would just be too thick, but then I'm afraid of being cold, so I'm a little bit indecisive. So I might just assemble the outer sleeves first while I think about it and see if I want to use any batting in this at all. Maybe I should just interface this as well. I can interface the lining as well, and I'll add a little bit more body and heat to it. I remember when I was first planning this coat, I looked into it, and there are some more like thermal or warm fusible interlinings you can use, but my point was that I didn't really want to buy anything additionally for this project. I wanted to use the things that I had, which included this fusible, the canvas, and yeah. So those are the next steps. I'm looking forward to it. I need to make a decision on the cuff design as well, but I'm going to leave that until this is assembled. For now, just some very simple sewing. I'm going to assemble the sleeves, and then I will set them in and line them. And that is it. Thank you very much for watching. I have made a very warm and beautiful coat. I'm very happy with it, and I hope to wear it a lot this winter. The quilted lining really is a revelation. Today is absolutely freezing, and I absolutely love it. And it has plenty of space in those sleeves and in the bodice so that I can wear my comfy huge jumpers this winter and still be able to wear something cute over it that I don't feel like a stuffed sausage in. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you're interested in the pattern, I'm going to put it up on my Patreon as usual. And yeah, I hope you stay warm this winter, and if not, make yourself a new coat.